Have you ever watched people in a crowded room instinctively gravitate toward one particular man? Not the loudest, not the most physically impressive, not the wealthiest or most famous, but a man who carries himself with an unmistakable quality of presence that others can sense but rarely name. This man moves differently. He stands apart not by effort, but by an internal alignment that casts a subtle yet profound magnetic field. While others' gazes dart hungrily from body to body, his remains steady and direct, anchored in a stillness that communicates more than any words. While others' attention fragments between what they're saying and what they're trying to get, his focus stays undivided, a singular beam of awareness that makes the recipient feel truly seen. While others perform, alternating between dominant posturing and desperate approval-seeking, he simply exists, comfortable in his own skin, unburdened by the constant need for external validation. This comfort isn't born of indifference. It's the profound ease of a man who has ceased to wrestle with his own inner demons, having confronted them in the shadows of his own making. Women respond to him differently too. They relax in his presence, their guards lower, the invisible armor they wear in a world of constant male scrutiny dissolving into a newfound sense of safety. They share thoughts they rarely express with other men, revealing vulnerabilities they've long protected. Not because he's employing manipulation tactics or dominance displays, but precisely because he isn't. His energy demands nothing from them. It flows, but does not impose. His attention doesn't drain them, pulling from their energetic reserves. Instead, it nourishes, offering a space of acceptance. His presence doesn't require their performance, their careful curation of self. It invites them to simply be. This subtle yet radical shift in dynamic isn't a trick of social engineering. It's the natural outcome of a deeper psychological recalibration. What sets this man apart isn't a technique, a pickup line, or a carefully constructed persona. It's a fundamentally different relationship with the energy flowing through him, particularly the primal, potent force of libido. In a world where 90% of men remain identified and driven by their sexual impulses, where every perceived slight and every unfulfilled desire can trigger a cascade of anxiety, aggression, or a desperate scramble for validation, he possesses something truly revolutionary: a desexualized mind. This doesn't mean a neutered, repressed, or powerless mind. Quite the opposite. It means a consciousness that has differentiated itself from blind identification with sexual drive. A mind that feels desire, perhaps even more intensely than before, because it is no longer clouded by the urgency of unconscious compulsion. But it is no longer possessed by it, no longer unconsciously driven by it, like a puppet on libido's strings. Carl Jung, that great pioneer of depth psychology, recognized this distinction as fundamental. He saw the shadow of unconscious drives manifesting as a relentless pursuit of power, often masking a deeper lack of genuine connection and love. He wrote, "Where love rules, there is no will to power, and where power predominates, there love is lacking. The one is the shadow of the other. The desexualized mind isn't about eliminating power or desire. It's about integrating them consciously, bringing them into the light of awareness, rather than being unconsciously driven by them from the murky depths of the unexamined self. Look around you. Society bombards men with messages designed to keep them identified with lust, to remain enslaved to their lower centers, their psychological energy constantly pulled downwards. Billboards featuring idealized bodies sell everything from perfume to hamburgers, subtly whispering promises of vicarious satisfaction. Entertainment reduces women to objects of visual consumption, sanitizing true intimacy into a superficial exchange. Social media algorithms feed on and amplify objectification, trapping users in cycles of comparison and craving. This isn't accidental. Unconscious men make ideal consumers. They follow predictable patterns. Their attention can be captured and monetized with ruthless efficiency, and their insecurities can be weaponized to sell products promising the very power, status, or sexual access they feel they've given away. The system, in its relentless pursuit of profit and control, doesn't want you conscious. It profits from your blind identification, from your unexamined desires, from the chaos of your internal landscape. This is the dark truth. Your lack of self-awareness is a marketable commodity. Jung saw this societal pattern decades before it reached today's extreme. In Modern Man in a Search of a Soul, he warned that the gods have become diseases. The archetypal energies humans once channeled through myth, ritual, and religion don't disappear when denied or ignored. They become pathological. The sexual instinct, divorced from its sacred dimension, stripped of its deeper meaning, and reduced to mere biological drive, becomes an obsession, a compulsion, a source of unconscious identification rather than conscious participation. In this environment, the man who achieves even basic psychological differentiation, who begins to separate his conscious self from the relentless pull of his drives, stands out dramatically. His presence communicates something entirely different, something genuine, attentive, and whole. This quality becomes increasingly rare and therefore increasingly valuable. The desexualized mind functions as modern man's greatest weapon in multiple dimensions, a shield against the pervasive lies of the external world and a sword for cutting through the illusions of the inner one. The first and most immediate benefit of cultivating a desexualized mind is the profound liberation it offers from internal forces that have kept you imprisoned in unconscious patterns. Think of the man whose awareness remains fused with sexual drive. He broadcasts his intent without speaking, a subtle vibration of need that resonates even before words are exchanged. His eyes linger too long on bodies rather than connecting with the person behind them, seeing an object rather than a being. His attention drifts during conversation, searching not for genuine connection, but for opportunities to advance a hidden agenda, to secure a perceived conquest, to get closer to the gratification he craves. His energy carries an unspoken demand that women exist primarily for his satisfaction, a subtle pressure that denies their autonomy and reduces them to a means to an end. Women's bodies register this predatory quality even when their minds rationalize it away. They tense, they guard, they keep emotional distance. They may not articulate it, but their nervous systems know precisely what they're dealing with. Another man who sees them as means rather than beings. This is the shadow self at play, operating outside of conscious awareness, dictating behavior and sabotaging genuine connection. Jung understood this dynamic through his concept of anima projection in Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious. He explains how men project their inner feminine, the anima, an archetypal image of woman held in the male unconscious, onto actual women. In doing so, they see not the woman herself in her unique individuality, but their own unconscious content, their own unfulfilled desires, their own idealized or demonized internal images. The undifferentiated man doesn't see women as they are. He sees screens for his projections, vessels for his fantasies, solutions for his inner emptiness, an emptiness often born of a profound disconnect from his own authentic self. The woman feels this projection landing on her. It's a weight, a reduction, a demand that she becomes something other than herself, that she conforms to his unconscious narrative. It's an exhausting and often damaging experience, leading to feelings of being unseen and misunderstood. But when you begin to develop a desexualized mind, something remarkable happens. Women feel safe in your presence, not because you're weak or sexless, which is a common fear among men who consider this path, but precisely because they sense they see you completely, as whole and autonomous individuals. Your gaze holds steady with theirs, meeting them fully, without searching for hidden motives or physical attributes. Your attention remains on their words, their essence, their being, undistracted by the clamor of your own desires. Your energy carries no hidden agenda, no subtle demand, no underlying expectation of return. This safety allows women to open in ways they rarely can with most men. They share more freely, without the need to censor. They express themselves more authentically, without the pressure to perform. They relax into genuine connection, rather than remaining vigilant against potential exploitation or the crushing weight of another man's projections. Not because they've consciously analyzed your intentions, but because their intuition, far more sophisticated than conscious thought, registers that they are being seen rather than consumed. This is the radical honesty of dark truth therapy, confronting the ways in which we have inadvertently inflicted our own internal chaos onto others and choosing a different path. What Jung called the process of withdrawing projections is precisely what is at work here. As you integrate your own anima, rather than projecting it outward onto women, you develop the capacity to see women as they actually are, as complex and multifaceted individuals, distinct from your internal archetypes and desires. Jung wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." This profound transformation becomes possible only when projection ceases, when you stop using others as screens for your unconscious content, when you liberate them from the burden of carrying your unexamined self. Have you noticed how women seem magnetically drawn to men who aren't desperately seeking sexual validation, who aren't caught in the frantic pursuit of external affirmation? How they chase men who don't chase them, not out of playing games, but out of a deep internal congruence? This isn't a technique or strategy, a clever manipulation of social dynamics. It's a natural consequence of psychological differentiation. When your consciousness isn't fixated on obtaining gratification, you communicate differently. You listen fully, truly absorbing what is said, rather than waiting for your turn to speak or strategizing your next move. You respond to what's actually being said, rather than what might advance your hidden agenda. The irony becomes apparent. By releasing the desperate grip on sexual acquisition, by letting go of the need for external validation, you become more genuinely attractive. By ceasing to treat others as means to satisfaction, you establish authentic connection, paving the way for true intimacy and understanding. What Jung understood, and what most men never grasp, is that differentiation from drives doesn't diminish power, it enhances it, channeling raw, chaotic energy into focused, intentional force. This enhanced power extends beyond interpersonal dynamics, deeply impacting the quality of your internal life. The undifferentiated mind lives in perpetual hunger. It is the realm of love addiction, where one endlessly seeks external sources to fill an internal void, a void that only grows with each unfulfilled craving. Satisfaction for the undifferentiated mind proves temporary at best, quickly replaced by renewed craving, a relentless, exhausting cycle of pursuit and fleeting relief. The man identified with his lust never has enough. Another conquest, another experience, another validation, yet he remains fundamentally empty, like a bottomless pit that no amount of external input can ever truly fill. This is the cruel trick of the shadow self. It promises fulfillment through acquisition, but delivers only transient highs followed by deeper lows. The constant seeking of external pleasure, whether sexual, material, or relational, becomes a frantic dance to avoid confronting the inner emptiness. But when you break this cycle, when you confront the dark truth that external gratification cannot fix internal lack, you discover contentment without acquisition. Your sense of worth no longer depends on what you can obtain, on the approval of others, on the fleeting thrill of conquest. Your happiness no longer hinges on fleeting gratification, on the next hit of dopamine. Instead, you discover that you already possess what you truly need, that the wellspring of value lies within, not without. This state corresponds to what Jung called the transcendent function, the psyche's capacity to create a third position that transcends opposing forces, a synthesis that elevates beyond either-or thinking. In the transcendent function, Jung describes this as a way of attaining liberation by one's own efforts and of finding the courage to be oneself. The desexualized mind doesn't repress sexuality, banishing it to the unconscious where it can fester and erupt in problematic ways, nor does it indulge it unconsciously, allowing it to dictate every choice and action. It transcends the opposition between repression and indulgence, establishing a higher unity that includes both restraint and expression in their proper measure, guided by conscious intent rather than blind compulsion. It is emotional discipline, born of self-awareness. This profound contentment transforms every action you undertake. What previously served only your desperate need for validation, your unconscious desire to fill a void, now becomes genuine service to others, an outflowing of inner abundance. Your work, your relationships, your creative output all shift from self-gratification to authentic contribution.
Not because you've suppressed your needs, making yourself a martyr, but because you've integrated them within a larger, more comprehensive identity, an identity rooted in self-possession and purpose. Have you noticed how life responds differently to men who act from wholeness rather than fragmentation, whose internal world is coherent and grounded? Ancient wisdom recognized this principle in the Gospel of Matthew. For to everyone who has, more will be given, and he will have abundance. But from him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away. This isn't mystical thinking. It operates psychologically through what Jung would recognize as synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that aren't causally connected, but reflect a deeper ordering principle, a mirror of internal states. In Synchronicity, an acausal connecting principle, Jung challenges the conventional Western division between mind and matter, suggesting that psyche and world are interconnected in ways rationalism alone cannot explain. The desexualized mind, having achieved greater internal coherence, a more unified self, naturally attracts external circumstances that reflect this coherence. Opportunities appear seemingly out of nowhere, aligned with your newfound purpose. Relationships deepen, moving beyond superficiality into genuine connection. Work finds meaning, becoming a source of fulfillment rather than merely a means to an end. Not because you're manipulating reality or forcing outcomes, but because your internal coherence naturally magnetizes external coherence. You become someone people inexplicably want to help, support, connect with, and open doors for. People sense this integrated state, this inner authority. They may not intellectually understand why they trust you, why they seek your counsel, why they remember what you say, but they respond to the integrated field of energy you've established. In a world where most men remain divided against themselves, wanting peace but creating conflict, seeking connection but generating isolation, claiming virtue but acting from shadow, you become remarkable simply by achieving basic psychological integration. This is the profound truth that dark truth therapy seeks to illuminate. True power comes not from external control, but from internal alignment. Developing this desexualized mind doesn't mean eliminating sexuality or suppressing desire into the dark recesses of the unconscious, where it will only gain more insidious power. It means establishing a conscious relationship with these primal forces, rather than unconscious identification with them. The sexuality of the differentiated mind is actually more powerful, more profound, more fulfilling, precisely because it flows from wholeness rather than desperation, from genuine connection rather than acquisition. It is a sexuality imbued with meaning, integrated into the fullness of being, rather than a raw compulsive drive. The path toward this differentiated state begins with psychological objectivity, the capacity to observe your internal processes without immediately identifying with them, without being swept away by every impulse and emotion. When sexual desire arises, you notice desire is present, rather than immediately becoming desire itself, consumed by its intensity. This slight shift creates crucial space. Space between stimulus and response. Space between feeling and action. Space where choice becomes possible, where intentionality can replace automatic reaction. This objectivity is the first step in dismantling love addiction, in recognizing the patterns of rejection and trauma, as responses to unexamined internal dynamics, rather than external fate. This objectivity requires confronting your shadow, not just the shadow of sexuality, the unacknowledged desires and impulses that drive you, but all disowned parts of yourself, your weakness, your selfishness, your dependency, your fears, your rage. These rejected aspects don't disappear when disowned. They don't vanish simply because you wish them away. On the contrary, they operate autonomously from the unconscious, hijacking your behavior precisely when you feel most out of control, when you're caught in cycles of toxic love or reeling from rejection. Jung's concept of the shadow stands as one of his most crucial contributions to psychology, a central pillar of masculine healing. In Aeon, Researches into the phenomenology of the self, he writes, "The shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality, for no one can become conscious of it without considerable moral effort. To become conscious of it involves recognizing the dark aspects of the personality as present and real. The desexualized mind first requires this moral courage, the willingness to see what most men spend their lives avoiding, the willingness to look unflinchingly at the parts of themselves they deem ugly, shameful, unacceptable. As Jung famously wrote, "Everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. Your shadow gains power not from its content, but from your refusal to acknowledge it. What you resist persists and controls you."
Deep, even, standard voice analysis reading, warning tone. Jung distinguishes carefully between the ego and the self. The ego is the center of consciousness, the I that experiences the world. But the self is the center of the total psyche, including both conscious and unconscious dimensions. In 2 essays on analytical psychology, Jung writes that the self is not only the center, but also the whole circumference, which embraces both conscious and unconscious. It is the center of this totality, just as the ego is the center of consciousness. The desexualized mind emerges through a right relationship between ego and self, between the limited I of everyday awareness and the broader intelligence of the complete psyche, the vast, mysterious landscape of your being. From this relationship with the deeper self comes inner authority, an unshakable sense of knowing and being. No longer needing constant external validation, no longer chasing approval, because you've connected with an inner source of value and meaning that is impervious to the whims of the outside world. This inner authority is the foundation of genuine confidence, not the brittle confidence of the inflated ego that shatters under pressure, but the quiet certainty of a man who knows who he is deeply and truly, having confronted the dark truths of his own making. Jung wrote extensively about this process, noting that the attainment of the self is nothing less than the finding of God. Not God as an external deity, but the God image within, the numinous center that brings order to the psyche, a profound sense of inner coherence and meaning. The self emerges as the new organizing principle of your psychology, a center that transcends and includes the ego, guiding it with wisdom and purpose. As Jung explains in The Ego and the Unconscious, the relationship between ego and self becomes the axis around which your entire psychological life revolves. The ego no longer identifies blindly with the contents arising from the unconscious, but establishes a living, dynamic relationship with them. This is what Jung called active imagination, dialoguing with the inner figures and energies, your anima, your shadow, your archetypal urges, rather than being possessed by them, allowing them to dictate your fate. These are not merely theoretical concepts. They are the practical, arduous work of masculine healing. The Jungian process of individuation, becoming the unique individual you were meant to be, requires this fundamental shift in psychological orientation. You cannot individuate while remaining identified with your raw libido, while remaining enslaved to love addiction, while continually reacting to rejection trauma from a place of unexamined pain. The energy must be differentiated, separated from its unconscious grip, and directed consciously toward the goal of wholeness, toward the complete integration of your being. This process isn't linear, but cyclical. You won't achieve permanent differentiation through a single insight, a single moment of clarity. You'll experience moments of profound clarity, followed by regression into identification, by old patterns reasserting their power, by the shadow rising again. This isn't failure, it's the nature of psychological work, the reality of masculine healing. Each cycle takes you deeper. Each recognition strengthens consciousness. Each confrontation with the shadow refines your sense of self. Jung named the cyclical nature of psychological growth the circumambulation of the self, a spiral-like movement that repeatedly approaches the center from different angles, ever deepening the journey. It is what he called the opus, the great work of psychological alchemy. In Psychology and Alchemy, Jung demonstrates how the ancient alchemists were not merely proto-chemists seeking to turn lead into gold, but were engaged in the same profound psychological process we're discussing. The transformation of base material, undifferentiated libido, the raw, unconscious impulses that control most men, into gold, differentiated, conscious energy, self-possession, true masculine power. This alchemical process involves specific operations Jung identified in the symbolic language of alchemy. The nigrido, the blackening, the confrontation with the shadow, the descent into the darkness of the unexamined self, the difficult and often painful recognition of your own flaws, compulsions, and disowned parts. This is where men begin to heal, not by chasing the light, but by confronting what they buried in the dark. The albedo, the whitening, the emergence of new consciousness, a purifying stage where clarity begins to break through, and a glimmer of the differentiated self appears. The rubedo, the reddening, the reintegration of passion and instinct at a higher level, a conscious and intentional relationship with the energies that once controlled you. The desexualized mind corresponds to this third stage, not the elimination of instinct, but its transformation and integration into a coherent, purposeful whole. It is here that true masculine energy is reclaimed, not as a tool of domination, but as a force of creation and connection. The rewards of this work manifest in every dimension of life. The quality of your relationships, particularly with women, transforms when you're no longer using others to fulfill unconscious needs, no longer projecting your internal landscape onto them, no longer trapped in the cycles of love addiction and rejection trauma. Your work becomes more meaningful when it flows from authentic purpose, rather than a compensation for internal emptiness, when it is an expression of your integrated self, rather than a frantic scramble for external validation. Your entire presence shifts from taking to giving, from using to to serving, from being a fragmented seeker to a whole contributor. This profound shift doesn't go unnoticed. In a world drowning in sexual objectification, in superficiality, in the endless pursuit of external gratification, the man with a desexualized mind stands as a refuge of genuine human connection. People sense this difference immediately, though they rarely name it. Women particularly respond to it, finding in your presence something increasingly precious, the experience of being seen for who they are, rather than what they can provide, or what roles they can fill in your unconscious narrative. You become that man in the room everyone inexplicably gravitates towards, not because you've learned techniques or strategies, but because you've achieved something far more fundamental: psychological differentiation from the drives that unconsciously control most men. This is the weapon Jung understood. This is the power of the desexualized mind. This is what sets you apart in a world designed to keep men identified, reactive, and ultimately powerless. The question isn't whether this freedom is possible. It is. The question is whether you're willing to do what is necessary to claim it as your own, to journey through the shadows of your own psyche, to confront the dark truths you've buried. Because when you develop a desexualized mind, when you free yourself from blind identification with sexual drive, you don't become less of a man. You become what few men ever achieve: a complete human being. And in that completeness lies a power others can only sense, but never understand, until they've experienced it themselves. So, I ask you, how long will you continue living driven by forces you don't recognize? How long will you mistake your reactions for choices, your compulsions for desires, your internal chaos for external fate? How long will you remain fragmented when integration, wholeness, and true masculine power await? The path toward the desexualized mind isn't easy. It demands courage, honesty, and a willingness to confront your deepest fears. But those who walk it discover that what truly matters has been within reach all along. Your liberation begins